So if you look at Alma 56, and actually throughout the Book of Mormon, you have the phrase, and it came to pass. In fact, if you turn to page 350 and just look at the beginning of many of the verses, you'll see the phrase, and it came to pass. Now, we could have talked about this at the beginning of the Book of Mormon year. We just decided to talk about it now. I want to share several perspectives of why this is one of the most important phrases in the Book of Mormon. Let me share a couple perspectives. First of all, just the literal perspective. And it came to pass. Not, and it came to stay. Not, and it came to linger forever. It just came to pass. Whatever suffering you're dealing with right now, it comes to pass. It comes for the purpose of passing. Everything we experience in this life will pass on by. Eventually, we will be brought back into God's presence. All of our suffering will be but for a moment. So when I see this phrase, I take comfort that this too shall pass. Another thought. The phrase, and it came to pass, if you translate it back into the ancient Hebrew, that phrase is actually the engine of the narrative. So imagine you want a car to go a little faster. You put your foot on the pedal and rev off. How in a narrative does a storyteller tell you that the action is moving forward and not just to linger on any one single scene? In ancient Hebrew, they would use this phrase. Today, if you think about a good action film, one of the ways you know it's fast action is there's lots of editorial cuts, like every couple of seconds there's a different angle or a different view of what's going on. In some ways, this is what the phrase, and it came to pass, does. It pushes the narrative forward. It tells you, I gotta keep reading, there's more that's happening. It's intended to encourage you to realize there's a lot of action going on in the narrative to drive you forward in the storytelling, okay? Now this other idea may be a little bit speculative, but here's another thought I'd like to share, that the underlying Hebrew phrase, and it came to pass, comes from the same Hebrew word that makes up the Hebrew word for God. We know that word as Jehovah. More appropriately in Hebrew, it's Yahweh. And why I think this is significant is the word Yahweh is the present tense of the Hebrew verb to be. There is no other word, actually, the word to be is never used in Hebrew in the present tense, ever, except to name God. You can use the future tense of to be or the past tense, but only present tense is fully occupied only by God, the self-existing one, the one who brings about all things. And how this connects is, and it came to pass, is kind of like the past tense of the verb to be, which basically what I see it as meaning is it is Jehovah, our God, Jesus Christ of the Old Testament, who brings to pass all things, even our salvation. So whenever you happen to see this phrase, you might think of it literally like, hey, everything in life will pass on by, or you might realize this is helping to drive forward the narrative, and it's a very powerful way to tell a story, at least in the ancient world. But significantly, it can remind us that God is the self-existing one who brings to pass all that is good in our salvation.